All right. Good morning. Good morning. Well, if everybody could just send Russ Orchard a thank you via message there. He's the Wizard of Oz. He's the guy behind the curtain with the music there and just making certain that this thing operates functionally. So thank you, Russ. One of my gratitudes. So let's get started. With everything that's going on right now in the world, as well as locally, mindset is always critical, but I think it's more critical right now, given today's environment. So my conversation with you this morning is going to be really about what we focus on. And I want you to, if you're taking notes, to write that down, that what we focus on is a choice. A lot of people would say that I have no choice. What's happening out there is what's happening. And I got to pay attention to it, or it's reality. So I just face reality. Well, that's not necessarily true. First of all, you don't have to pay attention to all of it. You could take a scenario, for example, an auto accident happens at an intersection and have 4 different people witness that accident and then interviewed by the police officer who's called to the scene. And you'll get 4 different answers or stories as to what happened in that intersection. So what's my point? My point is that we have an opportunity to see things the way we want to see them. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is see things the right way, but also, be honest with ourselves and see things the way that they are. And when I say see things the way that they are, that doesn't mean see things as negative, but just see things the way that they are. In other words, don't make assumptions. When I was a kid, my parents bought me a motorcycle. I was fortunate enough to have parents who, supported me in that way. And I was 5 years old. I got I think it was an 80, a Yamaha 80. And I remember going out on the desert for the first time on that motorcycle. And from the moment that we got there and they took it off the bed of the truck and we got it all set up and got me on it. And as I figured out how to use it, it wasn't until in the evening when I finished. I mean, it was on the bike for hours and hours, but it was in the evening in an event that brought the day to a close. It wasn't that it was dark, because I was still riding around in the dark, but it was an event that occurred. It got dark and my dad started a fire. My dad was great at campfires. In fact, I'd call it a bonfire. It was huge. I'm using the light of the campfire to be able to see as I'm riding around my track, just kind of circling around the camp. And for whatever reason, at one moment, I just started to stare at the fire. And I mean, it was, I don't know, it was fascinating. It's just that there was the light, there was the fire, and I was looking at it. And my dad noticed that I was coming towards the camp, kind of off the track. And I know at this point, he assumed that I was going to slow down and get off the bike. Well, that's not what I was doing. I didn't realize that I had gotten off track. What I was doing was focusing on the fire. And I wasn't reducing my speed, and I was getting closer and closer. And my dad all of a sudden jumps up out of the chair, like those old lawn chairs that we used to use, the aluminum and ribbon type chairs. He jumped up out of that chair. I remember the chair going flying, and he came running as quickly as he could towards me. But the problem was I was moving so fast. All he had the opportunity to do was to grab me and yank me off of that motorcycle, as the motorcycle literally, guys and gals, went right through the fire. Wood and sparks and everything going everywhere. Needless to say, of course, my dad wasn't too happy, and I wasn't happy or excited about that experience at all. But it proves the point. The last thing that I wanted to do was go into the fire on my first day of riding the motorcycle, for chance of maybe hurting myself, but also being grounded from using the bike. And yet that's what I did, because we have a tendency to go towards what we focus on. So one of the questions I want to ask you is this: what are you focusing on right now? See, it's like the moth to the flame. The last thing that a moth needs is to go to the flame, because it's going to be incinerated. And yet that's what moths do. They have a tendency to go towards the flame. In other words, we tend to get what it is that we look at. So what are you looking at right now? So I want to share with you some things that I think will help you look at things differently. We need to be informed, and ultimately information can translate into knowledge, and knowledge can translate into confidence. I want you to be more confident as we're working through these challenging days, through these challenging times. I had an agent say to me, it was just this week, in fact, we were talking, it was a coaching call, and they said to me, I can't imagine anybody wanting to buy or sell real estate right now. I can't imagine anybody specifically wanting to sell with all of this uncertainty. And I said, well, really, that's interesting. I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, I was talking to some clients, and they're retired, and they, their home is paid off, and why would they want to sell right now? Because there's so much uncertainty, and maybe they're going to get less for their home. And I said, well, that's interesting. And I said, I just had a conversation with an agent the day before. I was talking to the agent, I said yesterday, but it was the day before. I said, it was exactly the same scenario, except that they had a different perspective. They had some clients they were in conversation with who were coincidentally retired as well. They had a home that was paid off, same scenario. I mean, you couldn't have written this any better. And their kids are all out of state. And we were having a conversation about what they wanted to do. And they said, what we would like to do is sell our home and move to one of the states where one of our kids and grandkids are. We have 3 kids in 3 different states, and we have a choice to go to any of those 3 states. We don't know which one we want to go to yet, but we know at this point that we want to go. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is right in the middle of everything that we're going through right now. And yet those people want to sell their home and move closer to their family. See, it's interesting. The same exact scenario and 2 different interpretations as to what's going on and what people would be willing to do, simply based upon what the agents were focused on. So I want to share with you some information that I think is going to help you, because what I believe is that perspective is really important. The more information that we have, the better perspective we have, the more that we see, the fewer blind spots, or the smaller our blind spots are, and the easier it is to lead people through the process of taking what are very difficult decisions, especially right now. I mean, the fact is, taking the decision to buy or sell a home is always difficult, but it's exacerbated, it's compounded right now based upon what's going on. So I want to share some things with you. Now, there's some statistics, and the statistics are company specific. I'm going to go over Utah and California and then combine for those 2 markets. But these are company statistics. But what I would encourage you to do is that they don't just have to be company statistics. I think you could also use statistics within your MLS, within your community, within your market. The only reason I didn't do that is because I don't have access to all the information or the time to put all of that together. This information was available to me, but it's the same concept, and this will be very helpful for you as you go out and as you have conversations with people who are considering or maybe waffling or uncertain as to whether they should sell their home right now or buy a home. So let me just refer to these numbers. I'm going to go over Utah first, and then we'll do California, and then I'm going to give you the combined numbers. Now, look, if I go over these 2 quickly, it's okay, because remember, this is recorded and you can go back and you can write down these numbers. In the interest of time, I'm going to give you these numbers and not repeat them every time I give you the statistics. So I'm going to go through, first of all, Utah. Homes listed this week. And this includes today, with the assumption I just took the average of every day and then added some for today. And I've done that in every case. So just know that these numbers are going to be plus or minus. They might be off 1 or 2, but they're accurate. So listed this week in Utah were 20 homes. So there were 20 people in your market who decided to list their home. This week in Utah, 30 homes went under contract. Now pay attention to that. 20 homes were listed and 30 went under contract, which, what does that tell you? Again, what we're seeing is that there is more demand than there is supply. It's very interesting. Remember, we're how many weeks into this, and yet we're seeing that the number of under contract is exceeding the number that is listed. Okay. And then those closed for the week, over 20 homes closed for the week in Utah. Now, let me give you the month to date numbers in Utah. So listed month to date, 90 homes listed so far through the end of this week in Utah. Under contract, over 200 have gone under contract. All while we're going through this craziness, this pandemic, the uncertainty, people are still committing to buying homes. Over 200, ladies and gentlemen, in the Utah market that we cover. And then closed month to date, over 150. Now, let me give you the California numbers, those of you in California. In California, what we see is that there were 20 for this week that were listed. And then under contract, 30. So we had 30 go under contract, which again, it's interesting that those numbers are virtually the same in Utah and California, 20 and 30 with that 10 home differential. And then closed for the week plus 20. So basically the same numbers, give or take. 20 homes closed in California. Now, month to date, let me give you those numbers. Listed, over 40 homes listed month to date. Under contract, over 70 month to date. And closed, over 80 month to date. Isn't that interesting? So if you take the total between those two markets, which I think you should know, because as you're having conversations with people, you can legitimately say, my company and all the markets that we cover, we listed this week, we listed over 40 homes. Over 40 families decided to list their home. And this week, over 60 families decided to purchase a home. So 40 decided to list and 60 decided to buy. And then over 40 closed on their new home this week. So the total for month to date, so you have that perspective in both markets, is 130 listed, 270 under contract, over double went under contract as we listed. Does that not tell you that there is still demand, ladies and gentlemen? There is demand, and if there's demand, there will be a supply, because the demand will create the supply. When sellers know that buyers are still out there looking to buy, they'll decide to put their home on the market. And that is my point. And then there were over 230 month-to-date homes that closed, 230 people who sold, 230 people who bought, or families who bought in our market. So look, let's just go with that perspective through just a scenario. The scenario is that the client is uncertain whether they're a buyer or seller as to whether they want to commit to putting their home on the market or committing to purchase if they don't have a home to sell. Well, the first thing that you're going to want to do in that scenario is always just start by asking a question, whether it's the buyer or the seller. Ultimately, setting aside what's happening in today's crazy world, ideally, what would you like to do? What would you like to see happen? Would you like to sell your home? Would you like to buy a home? And just listen to what they have to say. Let them paint a picture, setting aside what's going on in the crazy world. What would they like to do? And give them an opportunity to tell their story. One of the things that this will do is going to help them get calm, because see, what we're trying to do is get them to shift their focus as well. Because see, if they're focused on the fire, where are they going to go? They're going to go right to the fire. So we got to help them shift their focus from the fire onto what ideally they would like to see happen if the world weren't as crazy as it is. And then once they create that scenario in their mind and you listen to it, this is key. So you ask the question, ideally, what would you like to see happen? Setting aside the craziness in the world, would you like to list your home? Where would you go next? What would that do for you and your family? Once they've shared that story, then what you want to do is repeat some of the things that they've shared with you. I know most of you know this. It's called repeating and affirming, but it's critical right now. It's critical that people know that they are heard, because there's so much isolation right now, and there's so much uncertainty, and there's so much negative news that people are having a tendency to focus on, that it's important that they know that there are possibilities and that you listened and affirmed those. And when you do that, it helps them to relax. And when we're relaxed, we feel more confident. And when we feel more confident, then we can move in ways that we didn't think possible before. Are you getting this? Is this making sense? I'm telling you, this is powerful stuff if you'll use it. It's simple, but it is powerful. So you listen to what they have to say. You repeat back some of the critical things that they said. So ideally, you'd like to sell your home, and you've got 3 different states you can move to, because you got 3 different kids and their families and the grandkids. So ask more questions like, well, which state would be, your favorite state to move to? Or this question, which kid is your favorite kid, or which grandkids are your favorite grandkids. Add some humor to it. Get them to joke about that. And then they share that with you. You repeat and affirm that. And then once you've listened to those stories and they know that by you repeating back some of that you listen, then you just simply use a transitional statement, transitioning from that conversation to where we need to take them next. So the transitional statement would be, for example, well, having said that, or as important as that is, or now that I know that, or given that, right? Any of those. And again, this is recorded, so you don't have to worry about me repeating those. You can go back and listen. Once you've done that, then depending upon how they responded, then we can go into talking about what's actually happening. In other words, get them to stop focusing on the fire and what is actually really happening. Because what's really happening is that people are buying and selling real estate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to share with them some sound bites. I'm going to share with them those statistics, not all of them. I'm not going to bore them to death, and unless they're an analytical, they're not going to want to hear all of that. But it would be interesting to tell them something, to give them a story about what's legitimately happening in today's market. So it might go something like this. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I am so excited for you that you have an opportunity to get closer to your family. It's cool that you've got your home here with equity in it, and whether their home's paid off or not is irrelevant, as long as they've got equity, right? You're fortunate that you have equity in your home and that you have the opportunity to move to another state to get closer to your family. Here's what's interesting. So many people, unfortunately, have the perspective, because of what's going on in the world and watching the news, that they think that the sky is falling and that nobody's buying or selling real estate. And the fact is that is simply not true. What we know is, in fact, in our marketplace, my company and all the markets that we cover, what we know is that this week alone, over 40 families listed their home. Over 60 families actually committed to buying a home. So more families decided to buy than even those who decided to sell, which means, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that there's still greater demand than there is supply, which tells us what? If you want to sell a home, always sell a home when there's more demand than there is supply, because then that supports a higher price. And that's what's cool. That's what's happening now. And moreover, despite the fact that there's craziness and uncertainty, people are still closing on homes. Over 40 homes were closed on this week in the markets that we serve. So now that you know that, let me ask this question. If we could help you get your home on the market and get it sold just as we have these other folks that I just mentioned to you, is that something that you would like to pursue? And the chances are that they're going to say yes, because they've already shared with you what they ideally wanted if there weren't all the issues going on in the world. And what you did is you helped them separate the chaff, stop looking at all of the distractions, all the negativity, stop looking at the fire and focusing on where they wanted to go. In other words, staying on the path. I've shared this before, that I've been in several race cars, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Porsches, Jaguars, high performance vehicles on fast tracks, and having world-class drivers next to me, coaching me around the track. And the one thing that they will tell you above all else is, when you're on the track, do not look at the wall, because when you look at the wall, that is what you're going to get. You will hit the wall. So ladies and gentlemen, let's be careful about what we focus on, because what we focus on is going to take people down the same path. Because as we have conversations, it's like being in the car. Whatever I focused on that track with that driver, with the professional driver next to me in the passenger seat, he went with me. And that's why he was adamant, John, do not look at the wall, because I don't want to die. It's important that you look at the right things and have the right perspective, so that you can do what I call educational sales, so that you can engage in educational sales, so that people have a better perspective about what's really happening. Because what's really happening is, yes, there are challenges in today's world, and yet we're able to navigate those. Now, you might say to me, well, John, but the truth is that there are people in today's world who cannot do anything because they've lost their job. Well, wait a minute. If they lost their job, they may need to sell because they need the money. They can't afford to continue to make their payments. So those people are going to sell. But there are people who in today's market are being transferred. I know, I've talked to Heather Barker. I've sent referrals to her. There are people who are being transferred, either because their job is requiring it, or they've decided by their choice that they're going to do it. So those people are in the marketplace. There are estate sales. Unfortunately, part of life is that people die. And as a result, those homes need to be sold. There are people who outgrow their homes and don't say, well, yeah, they outgrew their home, but they're going to decide to stay there because they can't afford. Well, that's not true. There are a lot of people who can afford, who still have jobs where their scenario isn't what you assume that it is. Stop making assumptions about what people can and can't do, and bring to the table the information, the reality that is still an opportunity in today's market to buy and sell, because this is what's going on. There's still more supply, there's still more demand than there is supply, and interest rates are at historic lows. Interest rates are lower today, give or take, than they have ever been since the Great Depression. So now that we know that, we get an opportunity to focus on the right things, to then take that information to help us be confident, because this is critical. As leaders, you cannot ask other people to lead you if you are not confident. They won't, they sense it. It's like a shark that senses blood, that smells it, it will attack. You can't have your people sensing a lack of confidence in you. It's not productive, but it's unacceptable. You're a leader, and as a result, you've got to come to the table with confidence, not naivete, not acting Pollyannish, not ignoring what's going on, but not ignoring what's going on. Have the right perspective, and when you do that, you can then take to them the information and educate them so that they can take the best decisions for themselves. And here's the thing, gang. If they decide ultimately, after you share with them those stories, those opportunities, and they decide not to do anything, is that okay? And of course, the answer is yes. Because here's what I say. Two things. Number one, stop trying to convince people who don't want your help to want your help. They either do or they don't. And then number two, stop assuming so much. Look at the opportunities out there that are possible. It's the reason that I asked the question of the prospect or the potential client or the past client in that scenario is, ideally, what would you like to have happen if we set aside what's going on in today's crazy world? Look, as leaders, we have to be the voice of calm. We have to be the voice of reason. We have to be the confidence in this scenario, because nobody will follow you if you don't first learn how to lead yourself correctly. And I think this conversation gives us an opportunity to kind of reset and to do that very thing. So look, go back and listen to this and you can get the numbers. But the other thing that I would challenge you to do is look at the MLS or MLSs that you serve in and pull those statistics. And then share that. Post it on social media. When you call your sphere of influence, share that information with them and let them know that not all is lost and still good things are happening. And the fact is many people have lost their jobs, still 9 out of 10 or 8.5 out of 10 have their job, and the world still is turning around. Okay, gang, look, be positive, be strong, stick to a schedule, take care of your mind, your body, your soul. Stay close to your family, and man, take care of yourself mentally and emotionally. These times are very critical. Follow a routine. Maybe your routine has changed. That's okay. Make certain it's the right one. We're going to get through this. There's no question we're going to get through this. This is temporary. And most of us will get through this growing, having a better perspective. And as a result, when this is all said and done, we're going to skyrocket. Things are going to be amazing. They will. They will. Because once you fight through this, you work through this resistance, it's like a plane going through the sound barrier. Once it hits that barrier, there's that resistance and you hear that bang, and then things just get smooth and they get easier. It's like a locomotive going down a track. Very difficult to get it up to 70 miles an hour, but once it hits 70 miles an hour and it has that momentum, it's much easier. You don't have to use as much horsepower to keep it going down the track. I promise you, when we get to that point, it's going to be amazing. So have the faith, stay focused on the right things, and make it happen.